Hello, welcome to this short lecture, which is about mass media. Mass media is a sweeping term that refers to all of the various modes of communication and expression that constitute such a conspicuous feature of contemporary reality. Books, newspapers and magazines, movies and television, websites, video games, and social media, as well as more generalized media like fashion, advertising, political discourse, architecture, design, and urban planning. When you talk to someone, you use the medium of oral communication, your voice, or the medium of hand signals if you use sign language. When you write an email to someone, you use the medium of electronic communication. But when I talk on the radio, or if I write something for publication, I am now using the power of mass media, media intended to reach a wide, potentially global audience. In some ways, interpersonal communication and mass media communication are similar. They both involve the transmission of a message from a sender to a receiver. They both require senders to be attentive to the expectations and value systems of the receiver. When I talk to my friend, I have to be able to read the person's mood and adapt my communication style to their temperament, the situational context, and their vocabulary. Likewise, mass media communications are also shaped by assumptions about the people they seek to engage. There is also a continuum between interpersonal and mass communication, since I might write an open letter to my employer or make a speech in my workplace that is intended to reach an audience of the 20 people or so who work in my small business. A lot of social media takes place in this intermediary zone, where someone might post a video intended for a small audience of friends, but which then goes viral and becomes a piece of mass media watched by millions of people. There is also something fundamentally unique about mass media that makes it very different from interpersonal styles of communication. Interpersonal communication involves a kind of mutual recognition and affirmation. Speaking with another person is a kind of holistic experience that involves a person's whole self. Mass media mimics this phenomenological effect in a variety of compelling ways, but it can never replace it. As a result, there is always a kind of impersonal anonymity that hangs over pieces of mass media, whether it's a news report, a YouTube short, a poem, a song, or anything else that's intended to be consumed by potentially anyone. The song is not really meant for me, it's meant for one, for some hypothetical person. One symptom of schizophrenia is misperceiving this nuance and believing that a song on the radio is speaking interpersonally to you. While some forms of mass media, such as newspapers and scientific research reports, embrace an anonymous stance, using language and design to highlight their objective, impersonal character, most forms of mass media try to overcome the anonymity inherent in mass communication by seducing their audience with emotional cues that substitute for the phenomenological salience of personal communication with a living and present human being. Bright colors, dynamic music, attractive faces and bodies, verbal acrobatics, and visual spectacles are all commonly used across different forms of media to pull audiences in on an emotional level, and they are, by and large, extremely successful at doing so. They are so successful, in fact, that they have largely won the war in the contests to see which can be more compelling, face-to-face or mass media communication, to such an extent that the ongoing explosion in the popularity of mass media, which has been experiencing turbocharged growth over the last 100 years, has been accompanied by an epidemic of loneliness. Crowded societies of people who never talk to each other because they're always consuming mass media on their digital devices. The prevalence of mass media in our lives and its enormous impact on every aspect of human life is undeniably profound. At the same time that young people become socialized as interpersonal human beings, they also become socialized through consumption of mass media, especially today when many young people have more screen time in their daily schedule than family time. Online videos shape our language, our sense of humor, and our perceptions of social reality. Movies fill our dreams with grandiose imagery. Television series involve us in the lives of characters who we sometimes feel intimate connections with. Popular music physically stimulates our bodies into movement while also shaping our attitudes and expectations about love and sex. The news media ruthlessly deploy propagandistic techniques to persuade us to love this idea or hate that idea, echoing the broader relationship between mass media and advertising, which in many ways can be thought of as equivalent terms. For any given member of a technological society, These mass media images are so prevalent, so deeply ingrained, and so personalized that it is literally impossible to say where mass culture ends and your self begins. Or rather, the self that you are is inevitably implicated, entangled, and nourished by millions of rhizomatic connections, almost all of which are completely unconscious, between the media you've been exposed to over the course of your life and your own hopes, dreams, and self-understanding. And this is true for pretty much everyone in the world. Despite this profound footprint of mass media, however, not only on our individual psychologies, but also on the shape of history and politics and the destiny of the human species, it is not uncommon to hear people scoff at the value of actually taking mass media communications seriously. People say things like, that's just a dumb song, movie, televised content, meme, fad. It's not worth thinking about. It doesn't really matter. It's not like it means anything. They're just trying to get your attention. It's just razzle dazzle with no substance. There's no point trying to think about it because it's just a disposable piece of pop culture that will be forgotten in about 2 minutes. And there's something mildly persuasive about this argument because part of mass media's strategy for influencing us is to disguise itself as fluff, as dross, as negligible, and unserious. The lyrics to a song are purposely juvenile, the jokes on a TV show are deliberately lame, and the latest movie sequel is nothing more than a rip-off of the last 6 movies in the series. It may look like there's nothing to see here, that pop culture is a semantic wasteland where nothing means anything or even tries very hard to look like it's trying to mean anything. But at the same time, when we look beneath pop culture's camouflage of superficiality, it is clear that mass media is a critical topic that invites scrutiny on many different levels. An individual online advertisement might appear to be ephemeral, but in just a few hours, that ad can be seen by millions of people. How does the ad influence them? In the case of an ad, there is the obvious question of whether or not it inclines them to buy the advertised product, but the more meaningful questions of audience influence address the way race, gender, and class are represented in the ad, the way the ad specifically addresses itself to certain demography through subtle cues, and the way these kinds of ads actually create demographies, serving as a kind of common reference point that people can use to signify their membership to some perceived community. A brand may start off by imagining the target audience it desires to have, and then wind up actually creating a real community of people who self-identify as members of that brand. The same phenomenon occurs across the mass media spectrum. Think of Taylor Swift fans, Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, Fox News viewers. These are social categories that come into being through the assistance of mass media. But it is also the case that at the deepest level, we are all members of a mass media tribe that, in many ways, is connected by our shared state of immersion in a more or less homogeneous soup of mass media. The mass media not only provide a shared language, but they also inevitably encode and negotiate ideologies. Ideologies are socio-political belief systems that we all have on a more or less subconscious level. An ideology is a picture of the world that we inherit along with our language and our culture, and it is reinforced through daily habits of thinking as well as throughout human history by narratives, songs, ritual, and drama. The ancient Romans believed that human fate was ruled by gods and that the Roman emperor was one of the gods, and their art and literature reflects and sometimes challenges this ideology. Colonial Europeans believed in their God-given privilege to rule over lands and peoples they had conquered, and their art and literature reflects and sometimes challenges these values. Early 20th century Americans believed that women belonged in the home, that homosexuality was a sin, and that North America belongs primarily to white people, and their art and literature reflects and sometimes challenges these values. In fact, it's almost disturbingly easy to look at any movie, television show, comic book, magazine article, or advertisement from the past that doesn't represent some taken for granted value that is ideologically inconsistent with contemporary values. But it's much harder to level the same critique at the mass media of our current reality. That's because our ideological values are largely invisible to us. We are the fish who don't know what water is because we're living in it, and mass media is where we are spending most of this life. Taking a deliberate approach to thinking critically and analytically about mass media texts is a powerful way to be able to overcome this invisibility, using conceptual and interpretive tools to defamiliarize and reevaluate pop cultural texts in the interest of gaining a better understanding of who we are and, just maybe, exerting more conscious control over who we are becoming.